This week on Motor Week, we get all Christmassy and bring you the best cars we've driven this year. They include Ginny's favourite city cars, Richard Hammond singing the praises of the Subaru Impreza, and Ian Royle spending a weekend with a Bentley.
The Subaru Impreza has long since proven that you really can have your cake and eat it, despite what your parents used to tell you. Look at it. It's positively practical. It's subdued. It barely stands out from the crowd. It's got 4 doors. You can fit the kids in the back. And there's a lockable boot at the very back to keep your valuables safe. It also has an irritating habit, certainly from the viewpoint of other manufacturers, of consistently coming first year in, year out in a certain well-known survey that looks at reliability. Subaru Imprezas really don't break down. Neither do they break the bank. At about 23 grand for this one, that's what? Posh rep car money, really. And for that, what do you get? Well, aside from all that practicality, it also has nestling under this bonnet, well, there's a few hints with all these holes and scoops on here. There is a flat 4 configuration, 2-litre boxer engine, turboed, putting out a nudges over 200 brake horsepower. That in turn is linked to a permanent all-wheel drive system developed from their enormous rallying success, at which they win year in, year out all over the world. It is an absolute storm to drive. But even that isn't enough for everyone. Because it's the way of the world, isn't it? There's always somebody who wants to go that one step further. And though this may look the same as the previous car, it isn't, because as the Impreza has risen to prominence and found favour in UK markets, so we're starting to see the derivatives finding favour. And I don't just mean sticking on a set of fluffy dice and plastic wheel arches, I mean substantial changes to the car. Look in any motoring related magazines and you'll see the kind of stuff I'm talking about. This, for instance, is an STIRA version. It's just one of many modified versions, and it goes all the way right underneath. Because the engine has been chipped, it's now putting out about 280 brake horsepower. Modifications are often made to the suspension with aluminium components, aluminium bonnets, aluminium boot. Huge changes to these things. In fact, a lot of them, like this one, are not very far at all from being a Group N rally car. Do not expect to climb on board a Subaru Impreza and be dazzled by the vibrant interior, because it ain't. It's very, very bland. It's as exciting as pulling on a pair of crimping slacks. Not that I ever have, ever. However, as soon as you pull away, things get a little bit more interesting. That flat 4 boxer configuration engine has got a beautiful soft burbling note at idle. As soon as you pull away and give it a bit, it starts to sound fantastic with a really satisfying roar and plenty of power. But the overwhelming impression is one of control of that power because of the extreme capability of the all-wheel drive system and the torque of the engine. It feels very nimble, it feels very small, everything feels within your reach. It feels like a very fast and a very capable car, but not like a car that's going to get away from you. That 4-wheel drive system, of course, has very real uses. When the weather comes in like this and it's not too pleasant, it will keep you going in the right direction. But you've always got to bear in mind that this is a very powerful car with over 200 brake horsepower going to those 4 wheels. If you hit your nice greasy country road, you could get yourself into trouble. And then there's this, the modified version, in which you can definitely get yourself into quite a lot of trouble very quickly. This one's been upgraded to about 280 brake horsepower, give a few. By quite a lot of modification to the engine management system. It has been chipped, as they say, and also there is even a water spray system on the intercooler operated by a dashboard mounted button, which really does put things into Looney Tunes territory. It is as close as you can get to a Group N rally car on the road. The ride is pretty jarring and crashing. It's extraordinarily purposeful, shall we say. There's all the noises from the drivetrain, from the transmission. It whines. There's huge noises from the engine, from the turbo. You do feel like you're driving a rally car. It is enormous fun, though perhaps not as user-friendly, and it makes the standard Impreza feel like a nice big friendly puppy. Provided you don't mind driving around in a supercar that looks like a shopping car, then the Subaru Impreza Turbo is unique. You can drop the kids off at school, head out into the countryside and pretend you're a rally driver. Not only that, you can continue doing it for years and years without worrying because it won't break down. They don't. And also, when you come to sell it in a few years, well, there's another pleasant surprise awaiting in that you won't have lost a fortune. The residual values are fantastic. Somewhat less compromised and less easy to use every day then is this, in this instance the STI RA, really representing any modified Subaru Impreza. And it kind of gets away from the idea of practicality with performance to concentrate on just the performance, to give you a breathtaking drive. Ultimately, it's got to be a case of horses for courses. Or you could say, if this one says you can have your cake and eat it, this one says you can keep your cake and stick it.
One wonders what life must have been like in the 20s and 30s if you were one of the famous Bentley boys. Dashing men who lived life to the full, drank hard and raced hard at famous circuits all over Europe. Right through the decades, the factory at Crewe have produced some truly memorable cars. How about this one? A 1956 Bentley Continental S1 Fastback, which, if you're interested, is for sale at this dealership in Cheshire. Price around £45,000. It's absolutely immaculate. It stands the test of time even today. But if you want a Bentley today, the car to buy is this, the new Arnage Saloon. But is it good enough to take on the world's best and transport Bentley into the new millennium? The Arnage and the Silver Seraph, both launched in 1998, were styled by Graham Hull. It's an all-new body shell over the previous Rolls and Bentley models, with greater torsional rigidity, giving improved aerodynamics and fuel efficiency. It has a very sleek appearance, certainly when compared to the previous model anyway, with flowing lines. It sits fairly low on the road and has a drag coefficient of 0.37, a 12% improvement on the old model. Now, the Arnage and the Silver Seraph are basically the same shape, apart from with the Bentley you get a few extra spoilers, and it's a shape that has grown on me tremendously since I've had this car. And of course the Bentley has this wonderful, wonderful distinctive mesh grille. But under the bonnet is what you want to know about, and this is where you get the 4.5 litre all aluminium engine from BMW. Now, it's basically the same engine that's in the 740. Thank goodness it's been worked on, it's been modified. It now has twin water-cooled turbochargers. It pumps out 350 brake horsepower, 413 pounds-foot of torque, which makes it very, very fast. It's just a shame that when you flip the lid and you look at the engine, it's not a hand-built engine anymore. Now, as you would expect, stepping into a Bentley is an experience all in itself, with this gorgeous, finest Connolly leather, the wood, the chrome, the thick Wilton carpets that your feet almost get lost in. It's like spending a day in a gentleman's club. These gorgeous cream dials, the chrome, the wood, the leather, it makes you realise the amount of work that's gone into producing this car. And what about back here? Well, as you would imagine, it's very, very comfortable. However, there's not the room that there used to be in the rear of a Bentley. Anyone over about 6 foot tall might have a bit of difficulty getting themselves comfortable. Your knees tend to be fairly high and you sit quite low. Apart from that, there are wonderful, wonderful electric seats here. And as for this, gorgeous picnic tables, ideal for strawberries and cream at Henley this summer. There are a lot worse places to be than in the back of here, that's for sure. A big fat cigar and a dry martini would go down very well right now. It will be very interesting to see how Volkswagen develop the Bentley brand, as they will certainly have to do after paying so much money for it. The range currently consists of the Arnage and 4 variants of the Coupe, the soft-top Azure, Continental R and T, and the newest arrival, the Sedanka SC, which you may have seen Ken Gibson driving recently on Motor Week. Baby Bentleys, updated coupes, who knows what we'll see in the future. Power to the rear wheels of the Arnage is handled superbly by a 5-speed automatic ZF gearbox, which has 2 modes, normal and sport. If you fancy a blast down country lanes, well, flick it into sport mode, and the ultra-fast kickdown will have you rocketing towards the horizon, so fast you'll hardly have time to catch your breath. It really is an astonishingly quick car. The growl you hear from the engine under normal driving becomes a full-blooded roar once you open the Arnage up. The throttle is light and crisp. There's no discernible turbo lag. One criticism of the car, though, is the amount of wind noise that comes into the cabin when cruising on the motorway, particularly here around the A-pillars. The brakes are superb thanks to a new power boost brake system with 4-channel ABS and micro alloy discs too. The ride is slightly firm, the handling is good, and the steering just nicely weighted to give the right amount of feedback.
0 to 60 comes up in 6.2 seconds, which for such a big car is still astonishing. Top speed has been limited to a mere 150 miles per hour. Gone are the days when the company wouldn't release power and performance figures describing them as merely adequate. Now they want to sing them from the rooftops. The old phrase about if you have to ask how many miles to the gallon it does, you can't afford it, well, I suppose it's still relevant. But even if I could afford this car, I'd like to know how many miles it does do to a gallon or a tank. Are you sitting down? Well, 12 miles per gallon urban, 16 combined, with a tank that takes nearly 21 gallons. It'll set you back well over £60 to fill up. Still, most Bentley owners have about 4 other cars in the garage, so I guess they can afford it.
Despite its huge size, it's surprisingly easy to hustle this car fast down country lanes. The grip and the cornering are tremendous and the power just keeps coming and coming. Mind you, this is one car I wouldn't like to take down a narrow country lane. Meet something coming the other way, and it's doubtful if the driver will doff his cap and offer to move out of the way for you, governor. So, is the Arnage a good car? Certainly. Is it a great car? Possibly. Is it a car that's worthy of the Bentley mark? Absolutely. But can you say it's worth the £145,000 purchase price that this will cost you? Well, that has to be subjective. If this is just another car in your fleet, well, you probably hardly notice the dent in your bank balance it would take to buy this car. A new S-Class is half the price of the Arnage, for instance. You could probably buy a row of terraced houses in some parts of the country, but an ocean-going yacht is considerably more expensive than this. And that's the sort of context that you have to take with cars that cost this amount of money. Is it to be another rare masterpiece to hang on the walls of your mansion, or a Bentley Arnage? There's only one answer for me, and it's this. It may not be the best car in the world, but it certainly beats staring at a picture.
Still to come after the break, more of the best cars of the year.
There are plenty of times here on Motor Week that you've seen us behind the wheel of fabulous, expensive, fast cars. Cars like that are what driving is all about. And yes, we'd all love to find one parked outside our house in the morning.
Unfortunately, the car that we'd love to own and the car we have to own are actually very different. The reality needs to be an affordable, practical car, something to nip around in and transport us all from A to B.
And those are qualities that these two midget gems certainly have. The Seat Arossa and VW's Baby Lupo. Cute little names, in cute yet practical packages. But they're also cars that won't leave you pleading with the bank manager. But how do these super minis, that are just perfect for today's super mums, compare with each other? In terms of the factor, they're both sweet little bundles. In fact, from behind, to take the most observant of mums to even tell them apart. They both have a squared off little hatch at the back that opens to reveal a tiny amount of storage space which is actually even smaller in the Lupo. But that's the only point that makes the Arossa the more attractive of the two. Both cars have a very similar look. They do, after all, share the same daddy, otherwise known as Volkswagen. But the story here is one that's familiar to many siblings.
Unfortunately, the Arossa has lost out to its little brother in the looks department. Now, they are very similar. In fact, they could almost be twins. But while the Lupo has the potential to make it to the catwalk, the Arossa is always going to be the one known as having a good personality. But hey, when it comes to cars in this class, isn't a good personality what it's all about?
This is the kind of car that you immediately feel at home in. The 1.4 engine feels nice and punchy, it revs smoothly, and its 60 brake horsepower gets you to a top speed of 100 miles per hour. 0 to 60 takes 14 seconds, a couple of seconds slower than the Lupo.
The 4-speed gearbox is slick and it responds well. Now my only gripe is that the power steering, which by the way is standard on all models, feels a little bit heavy. But that aside, this car sticks to the road like glue when you corner, and it really is, surprisingly, a very entertaining drive. The Arossa shares its platform with the VW Polo. Well, in fact, to be perfectly honest, it probably shares an awful lot with its cousins from Volkswagen. But that isn't a bad thing, far from it. What it actually means is that Seat's days of quality control problems are now long gone.
There's a definite feeling of quality about the Arossa. But of course, quality costs. And in this case, the 1.4 SE will set you back £8,395.
And that price includes a few extras, things like central locking, electric windows, and a pollen filter if you're a hay fever sufferer. Now the cabin isn't the most exciting of places to be, what with this extremely large, bulky dashboard of yes, black plastic. But everything does feel solid and well built, and as if it would withstand the hammer that a family will no doubt put it through. Now we know that little Lupo comes tops in the looks department, but what about that bit that we spend all our time in? The interior. Well, the bright green upholstery that tones with the exterior paint job will certainly wake up the kids in the morning. I think it looks great, it's really bright and cheerful. But don't worry if green isn't your thing, because there are plenty of other colours you can choose from. Now in here the look is very modern and really well thought out. There's a very interesting use of shapes and some wonderful design touches. The Arossa may have been well built, but this eclipses it. It just oozes quality and design. You could almost be in a Golf that's been shrunk in the wash. Just look at the way the grab handles and the cup holders are dampened. There are plenty of ingenious storage spaces, and my favourite touch for those cold winter mornings, heated seats. These are things that you would normally expect to find in a luxury marque and not a super mini. In fact, the quality in here could put many luxury cars to shame. But then, this is a Volkswagen.
And this 1.4 SE may be more upmarket than the Seat, but it's going to cost you more as well. Around £1,200 more at £9,500. But remember, because this is a Volkswagen, the reputation and build quality mean you won't lose quite so much money after a few years of motoring.
And what happy motoring it will be. The 1.4 engine produces 75 brake horsepower. That means you get a top speed of around 106 miles per hour. And if you're up for it, you can get from 0 to 60 in just over 12 seconds. But somehow I don't think the Lupo is going to attract too many boy racers. Now this 1.4 engine is definitely a better buy than the 1 litre. The 16 valves means that it rushes around town in a hurry to get all your jobs done. It really does feel very nippy. Overtaking is no problems in it, neither is cruising on the motorway.
The benefits of super minis are of course cheap insurance. Group 5 in the case of the VW and a low Group 3 for the Seat. They'll also be cheap to run as they both average around 45 miles to the gallon.
And now it's time for the bit that all brothers and sisters hate, picking the favourite. And in this family, it's a very close call. The Arossa is an excellent value for money package, and surprisingly, it's very entertaining to drive. The Lupo isn't quite so much fun behind the wheel, but it's the excellent build quality and those wonderful design touches that really make it stand out. And as I doubt that many of us are buying a super mini with performance in mind, for me, the Lupo gets to be the favourite in this family.
Off-road driving, piece of cake. Just swing your wheel onto the grass and off into the boondocks. You've seen it a million times in television adverts for 4x4 vehicles. There's nothing to it. Well, some manufacturers think there actually is a little bit more to driving off-road. This is the imposing facade of Duncan Park here in North Yorkshire, one of 7 venues right across the country where Mercedes Benz are offering specialist cross-country off-road driving courses to people who buy these vehicles, the new Mercedes Benz M-Class. It's often said that the most serious obstacle most of these big off-roaders will have to overcome is the curb outside the school or the speed humps in the supermarket car park. It's true that around 80% never even get their tyres muddy, but that's to miss the important psychological point of these cars, that if you wanted to drive up a mountain, well, you could. And people have to know that the reality of off-road performance really lives up to those brochure claims before they'll buy. The course costs £220, and that includes luncheon at the stately home of your choice. At the moment, around 5% of new M-Class owners are taking up Mercedes Benz offer, but they hope that figure will improve substantially in the future. So let's see what's on offer. First impressions off-road are really good. The vehicle rides really smoothly with its all-independent suspension. None of Land Rover's beloved beam axles here. Getting into low range is simplicity itself, and then you just sit back and let the automatic transmission and the complicated electronics look after you. This is very close to all the courses on offer around the country. The object, say Mercedes-Benz, is not to build an immensely challenging or frightening series of obstacles, more to follow the tracks that gamekeepers and foresters would use to get around the estates. And that's not to say you won't get a lot of fun on steep hills and water splashes. I think this Mercedes course is an excellent idea. It's not cheap at £220, but the vehicles aren't cheap either, and you get an excellent lunch in a stately home thrown in. However, Mercedes say that if more people do take up the course, well, it could be provided free as part of the purchase of the car. And that's something I'd like to see a lot more 4x4 manufacturers doing.
Coming up on next week's show, we reveal our list of lemons and tell you about the worst cars we've driven this year. Richard Hammond moans about the 406 Coupe, Ian Royle fails to get to grips with Ford's new Ranger, and Ken Gibson finds fault with a Bentley. All that next week on Motor Week.